Hey there, it's episode 29 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. If you're a new listener, welcome. And a returning listener, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. Today you're going to hear from Maureen Stoecklein. She's a registered dietitian and a retired firefighter. And she's currently the sports dietitian for the Detroit Tigers. Maureen and I have been friends for a number of years, and I think you're really going to like this episode. So, if you get something out of it, please like the episode, share it with someone you know, and perhaps subscribe on your favorite platform. Here's Maureen. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hello, podcast listeners. I am back today with my friend, Mo Stoecklein. Mo, please say hello to my podcast people.
Hello from Michigan.
Hello from not sunny Michigan. Mo, okay, first of all, I have to thank you because this is the second time you have recorded with me. Let me just tell you a little story. Did you know that there's something on a microphone called gain?
No.
Which is different than gains in the gym. Gain. And gain is different than volume, evidently. And evidently I had it set way too high in our first recording, and poor Jeremiah couldn't sort it out. So here we are again. Thank you so much.
Round 2 is going to be even better than round 1.
Round 2, here we go. And again, thank you, Jeremiah, for all your work trying to rectify my gain mess. This one's going to be better. Okay, Maureen, first off, before I ask you the big 3 questions, I want to know, how is retirement?
Oh, retirement's glorious.
It's glorious.
I think probably my favorite part about retiring from the fire service is sleeping in my own bed most every night. Now, I do some traveling with baseball, but knowing that I'm going to be in my own bed every night has just been really life-changing for me. And, sleep is a priority of mine. And so I've become a little bit more meticulous with my sleep schedule. And it's really made a significant impact in just really my life as far as like how I feel every day. Other than a few minor things I think are stress-related that my body is reacting to. But in any event, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed. And then, of course, being able to be around my family a little bit more, which is nice too.
And as we always say, everything gets better when you sleep. Now, you kind of just, mentioned it. You said baseball, but you didn't tell the whole story. Tell us the baseball aspect of your life. What's going on?
So currently, once I retired from the fire department, I took a position with the Detroit Tigers. I'm their Major League Nutrition Coordinator, which means I oversee all of the nutrition operations for the Detroit Tigers. So right now it is cool and cold in Michigan, but we are actually ramping up for spring training. I leave for spring training on February 8th, and I'll be there until March 28th. And so from the 28th on, that's when 162 baseball games start, and the season's in full swing. So it was a short off season, but this is my second season with the Tigers. I served 3 seasons with the New York Mets, and I did that while I was working on the fire department too. So that was quite a juggling act, but I'm just really grateful that I had the opportunity to retire when I did, and to now have this really kind of cool position with the Tigers.
Kind of cool. We'll use our finger quotes. Kind of cool. I'm glad you threw the Mets in there too, because I was going to make sure you got that detail in.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go to the 3 rapid fire questions, lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Who is Mo Stoecklein?
So, who's Mo Stoecklein? Let's see. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm passionate about helping people from all walks of life really be the best versions of themselves. So I like to think that nutrition is my specialty, which I think it is, but I also feel like it's just an all-encompassing, wellness is all-encompassing. So I do a lot of hopefully inspiring on all aspects of wellness too. And I'm also someone who's very passionate about my family. So I love spending time with my mom and dad, especially. And I think I've seen more and more great value in spending time with them as they're getting a little bit older. And I have a dog named Bailey, who I truly love to spend lots of time with. And during the off season, he's really gets lots of walks, and he's very fit right now. So we got to get him in shape for baseball season. And then, of course, my husband, Chris, who is also a firefighter, and I'm just so fortunate to have such a supportive husband to let me do all these crazy things that I do.
And just a quick note about Bailey. Bailey is, how would you explain him? He has no expression on his face whatsoever. I call it resting Bailey face.
It is resting Bailey face.
It's completely expressionless. But he has a friend named Kevin. Love that name. Shout out Kevin. Who has even like more of a resting Kevin face. I don't get it.
I know, they're besties too. Yeah, Bailey is really something else. I always think he's judging us. You know, I don't know what he's thinking, but he's constantly judging everyone who comes in front of him.
I agree, Bailey. It's a judgy face. All right, Mo, what sets your soul on fire?
So I definitely got to be helping people. So I feel such a sense of accomplishment when I get small little text messages from some of the folks that I help, whether they're clients or just friends of mine actually. But when I'm able to just shed a little bit of light on helping someone to feel their best, that's really what kind of keeps me going. And it's not, I'm fortunate to work with professional athletes, but it's more often the young female volleyball player that maybe wasn't eating very much at all, period, or maybe wasn't eating much before they competed, or maybe wasn't doing their recovery nutrition quite right. So just little pieces that they pick up, and then they ultimately start to feel better, compete better, and they just shoot me a little message to let me know. That's really kind of what keeps me going, and something that I really just can't get enough of.
Well, and I have one more rapid fire question for you, but I'm going to do a side question first. There is this perception out there that professional athletes know exactly how to train, exactly how to eat, exactly how much sleep to get, how to hydrate. Would you say that that is largely true or largely not so true?
So I think there is a certain percentage that has embraced kind of that whole concept of wellness and longevity in your career from the beginning. And maybe that has to do with the education they received in college. Maybe they were brought up that way. I'm not sure. But I do think there's a large percentage that lean completely on the staff to kind of navigate that for them. And I think really when you look at the fire service, and this is a comparison that I've always made after having some exposure to professional sport, is that, professional athletes have a lot of resources that they can lean on. And they're surrounded by the top-notch I like to say dietitians, but
of course,
sleep professionals, physical therapists, doctors, you name it, strength coaches, they have all those really great resources. And I think the fire service is something where obviously we don't make that kind of money in that line of work. But on top of that, we have to figure out how to navigate it all ourselves. And so how can we source all of these great resources ourselves? And that's where I feel like a social media presence is really important. So folks like you, Annette, and Megan Lautz, Rescue RD, and so many other strength coaches that are out there that are able to push out really helpful and great information on the cheap is so important, because that's something that I always educate not only athletes, but firefighters alike, is where are you sourcing your information from? So trying to educate on that piece is really important. But there are resources out there that we can draw off of. We just have to find them on our own. And so oftentimes when you link onto one really great person like Annette, then from her you can kind of follow other people that are in line with the resources that we need. So I think that's the big thing, the big misconception. And I also think professional athletes, there is a misconception that they really have everything dialed in. In fact, when I first took my job as a dietitian, I thought, oh my God, they're going to know so much more than I know. I've really got to brush up on things. And they'll still come at you with the same questions that you get from high school athletes and from, college athletes or from firefighters. So it's really a very, it's very different, but especially the main thing is that they just have access to all kinds of resources.
I think that's absolutely accurate, and thank you for your kind words about my social media. I try. I'm aspiring. Megan does really well. I'm aspiring to be Megan. Okay, Third rapid fire question. How are you changing the world? And I know you answered it a little bit, but do you have any specifics?
Well, I think that, I think getting out into the community and educating is a big thing that I enjoy doing. And so even though I, spend the majority of my time with the Detroit Tigers right now, I still try and get out into the community and educate, especially female athletes, because I think that, there's power in numbers with females. And I want to get the right information to them because they're so impressionable. So I think that's the main thing that I try and do. So like next week, I'm talking to a Girl Scout group just because I used to do that in the fire service. Like anytime the Girl Scouts came, Mo was the official tour guide. In fact, I think they'd schedule it on the day I was there just for that reason. But, I still have them reaching out now from a nutrition perspective. And so I think that's how we can do it is really kind of impacting our youth and hoping that we can make a difference with them. So moving forward, they don't have some of the same challenges that maybe we as female athletes had, kind of navigating things on our own.
Yes, making the path a little bit easier for the next generation. Not only the females, but for the young men and women who are trying to come in the fire service too. I think that's really valuable, especially since we're having a hard time recruiting them now.
Absolutely. And I do think that, the academies are a great place for, professionals, the ones that I mentioned, strength and conditioning, mental skills, sleep, nutrition, all of those. I think that's an area where we've really got to try and make an impact, and not every department has a budget that's going to allow for that necessarily in their academy. And some of the smaller academies, if you market yourself to them, they're really looking for that type of information. And so I've been fortunate to be able to teach in a local academy that really pushes firefighters out to all the local departments. And so 8 weeks of health and wellness is pretty unheard of in an academy setting, both police and fire. So I do think there's a market for that with our line of health professionals, and it's just a matter of approaching them and kind of coming to them with a plan. And I think if you come with the right plan, they're going to really be on board with it, because this is information that's going to create longevity in a career and ultimately help these, students get a job.
And that is one thing that I kind of preach to the professionals too that are trying to work in public safety. It's this. Those administrators could not be more happy to offload the responsibility for health and wellness. And some of them don't have even the first clue of how they would do that. And so your job as a professional is to sort of draw the roadmap for them. This is the solution. This is how much it costs. And this is your potential return on investment. Sign here and let's get started.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Yes. I think if you have a really detailed plan like that, they don't even know where to start most of the time. And even with me, with the academy that I worked at, it was basically like, hey, you have 8 weeks, do whatever you want with those 8 weeks. I was like, oh, this is great. Let's do yoga. Let's have a physical therapist come talk. Let's, really integrate some other things. So I think a lot of, not only departments, but these academies are looking for that guidance.
Absolutely. So I would love to know how you got from being a dietitian to being a firefighter. Tell me about that path, because that's not real traditional.
Right. So I started out as a clinical dietitian, and I'll be honest, that just wasn't my thing. So I was working in a hospital, and I just really missed being a part of a team. Not that when you're working in a hospital, you're not functioning as a part of a team. You truly are. I just wanted a more physical job. I wanted something that was a little more hands-on. And I wanted something where I could kind of utilize some of my skills that I've acquired just from being a college athlete. And I've always been passionate about nutrition. And so I just thought that the fire service was a good, starting point for that. So I went and visited the academy and immediately was drawn to it. And so I practiced for about 3 years as a clinical dietitian and then made the switch. And so once I made the switch, I really kind of, kept up on nutrition, but didn't really practice. It wasn't until I had about 15 years on the department that I really kind of re-submerged myself in nutrition. And it was really from a firefighter and nutrition standpoint. So once I started working with more athletes, I really saw all the connections between how professional athletes train and how, collegiate athletes train and how firefighters should be training. And, we don't have the luxury of knowing our game time, and athletes do. So there's a lot more that goes into, creating the whole package for a firefighter or for, any first responders, really.
I love our paths are actually quite similar, because once I got into the fire service, I kept training, but I was still training general population and moms, and bikini competitors and hockey kids, and I was training anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
And it took me about 8 to 10 years to put it together like, hey, dummy, you have sort of two skill sets that you could marry together quite effectively. So
Absolutely.
same path.
And it really put perspective on our own training too. Like for me, I was always a runner, run, and, you know, do marathons and distance and really endurance based. And once I, you know, became a firefighter, I realized that there's obviously a lot more to being a great firefighter, and that strength component, especially as I was getting older. I thought, oh my gosh, these people we're hiring could be my sons and daughters. I better make sure I'm strong. So I completely changed the way I trained, which then, of course, from a nutrition standpoint, kind of opened my eyes to a whole new avenue of how firefighters should be fueling themselves as well.
Well, let's move on to that, because I have some specific questions, but I'll feed you the bait, because I know we've talked before. You have a philosophy, which is firefighters to some extent are going to eat what they're going to eat, but how can we improve the quality of what they're eating without trying to implode their plan? So riff on that for a little bit.
So I feel like, you know, I think things get overcomplicated really in all walks of nutrition, but in the fire service, I think they do too. And my foundation has always been to kind of return to three main components, which is number one, making sure we're hydrated. I think that's a huge piece for the fire service, especially because just by nature of the activities that we're expected to do and the gear that we wear, arriving on shift dehydrated is a bad idea, because you could catch a run right at 8 o'clock and your body's going to have to draw off of something. And if you don't have fuel in the tank and you're not hydrated, you're setting yourself and your partner and your whole crew up for failure. So I think hydration's a really big piece. I think the second piece is really improving the quality of our diet. So eating more fruits and vegetables is something as basic as that. So I always use the rule of thumb, we should try and get at least 8 to 10 different fruits and vegetables a day. And that seems overwhelming to many, especially because many don't even eat one or two. That doesn't mean servings, that just means variety throughout the day. So if you have a smoothie and you put, 5 different things in there, there's 5. So that just means approaching our meals a little bit differently. How can I improve the quality of my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, and my snacks? And so color is something simple that we can, really break it down to, and just trying to add color to our plate. And then the last thing is trying to eat, food in its most natural form as much as possible. Now, certainly we're always on the go. We don't always have time to meal prep. Sometimes we're stuck eating food out wherever we might be while on duty. And so that's okay. It's just when you have the opportunity to eat food that's a little bit more wholesome, then do it. So we work, at least with my department, I worked a 24-hour shift. We work 10 days a month, essentially, 10 or 11. What about all those other days when you're not at the station? Can you carve out time to maybe improve upon the not so great choices you had to make due to the fact that you were on shift? And the same thing goes with sleep. The same thing goes with moving your body. So you never know what your shift day might bring, but you can always try and improve on it the days when you're not there. And that can make a significant impact in your longevity of your career and just yourself as a human. So those are really the 3 points that I try and stick with. And then the last thing really is just trying to, once again, improve the quality of meals and snacks. So is there protein when you're eating? So does your plate have protein? Do your snacks have protein? And then is there fiber? Because fiber is so important for satiety, and it's also important for our heart, and it's also important for that ever desired regularity. So it's really important for that. And I think one of the most common complaints I get from athletes or just humans is that I'm just not regular. And that's because there's simply not enough fiber, fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Those are the foods. So we look for cleanses and detoxes and all this crazy stuff to be regular, when all reality is eat some fruits and vegetables and some whole grains, and regularity will come, especially if you drink some water. And then the last thing is healthy fat. So are you including some nuts, seeds, nut butters? Are you including some olive oil, some avocado? So really trying to source those healthy fats. So I really think nutrition gets so overcomplicated. And if we can just focus on hydrating, eating more color, and then trying to make sure that we've got a protein, some fiber, and some healthy fats, it really comes down to that. And then, occasionally I get folks who say, well, my sleep is terrible at night. Well, are you eating a huge meal an hour before you go to bed? Maybe bump that back and try not to eat. And then The other thing in that's really frustrating is alcohol. So I think that's such a roadblock for so many things, but I actually oftentimes have clients that will say, I'll do anything you tell me to do, but I'm not going to give up my glass of wine at night. Well, let's talk about your goals then, because it can really hinder so many things, especially sleep. So that's always an area that I think there's some room for improvement if alcohol is something that you include.
We're going to back up to...
I went on a tangent.
No, this is so good. Quality of meals and snacks, making sure to get fiber in fruits and vegetables, which has been what I've been preaching for a really long time. And I'm pretty sure I had the conversation with you because I was on this high horse. One of the departments that I work with, their station fund or kitty or whatever you want to call it, actually goes to Costco and buys the giant drums of Metamucil. And so I was on my high horse, like, guys, you shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. You should be eating fruits and vegetables, blah, blah, blah. But I think it was you. Didn't you and I have this conversation? Does this sound familiar or not?
Nothing like getting hooked on that before you need to be.
Well, yeah. Okay. So it must not have been you, but I think the dietitian that I was conversing with was saying, it's not optimal. It's certainly not best case scenario, but at least they're getting some fiber in their diet. And I was like, ugh.
It's true.
Okay. So I've stopped bitching at them about that. I still don't like it, but I've stopped bitching about that. So can you tell us pros, cons? Is it something that you would recommend or you would do? Ready, set, go.
Well, I feel like number one, it's constipation, which is a topic that's really popular to talk about at all ages. But I think it's something that is fixable. And so if the quick remedy is to, use a product like Metamucil, yeah, it's fiber, it's psyllium fiber. And so it's going to remedy the problem, but you also have to have that education piece behind it. So I think oftentimes we go to the doctor, they cure it with that. Some doctors, not all. But I think if you were to educate, like clearly if a human being is to eat 8 to 10 different fruits and vegetables a day and maybe have some oatmeal and some whole grain bread, throughout the day and get some, I think for the most part, the American population is underfibered. And so if we are to get somewhere around 35 to 40 grams of fiber a day, like that regularity comes back. It's just a matter of mindfulness. And so I think sometimes we think we're eating enough and we're just not. And if you've ever looked at a loaf of bread, maybe you're buying whole grain bread and you're thinking, I eat fibery bread. Well, sometimes whole grain bread has 1 gram of fiber. So if you find a bread like Dave's Killer Bread and there's 6 grams of fiber, well, now we're getting somewhere. We're getting towards that 40. So, you kind of have to do a little bit more homework as to, am I actually getting enough fiber? And is there enough fiber in what I'm eating? But I think if that's the quick fix, then, it's extremely uncomfortable to be constipated. So if that's going to ease the problem, then I don't think it's a bad tool. You just don't want to have to use it every day and be dependent on it. Carry your orange jug everywhere with you.
Doesn't that sound terrible? Well, and you already mentioned Megan the Rescue RD, and one of the infographics that she put out in the last, 6 months was, men, 35 to 40 grams of fiber per day is the goal. And then she said her typical firefighter gets around 5.
Yeah, I agree.
So they're not almost hitting the mark. They are falling so short.
Absolutely.
So just those fruits and veggies should help a lot.
Absolutely. When your diet is highly processed, and, I don't like to completely ding on processed food because it's a reality, and sometimes we have to, and there's different variations of, like, frozen vegetables are processed, but frozen vegetables are great. But if you're stopping at the gas station for all of your meals and you're throwing them in a microwave while you're at the gas station, that's a really highly processed diet. And so when you add up your fiber from that, or if you're stopping at fast food restaurants or going out to eat a lot, you're just not going to add it up. So rather than counting your macros, I'd start with counting your fiber grams. And then if you can get up to 35 or 40 grams of fiber, then regularity will not be an issue. In fact, if you listen to this podcast and you think, well, heck, I'm going out, I'm really going to up my fiber, you're going to run into the opposite problem. So start out slow. Otherwise, you're going to shoot the messenger.
Literally shoot the messenger. I had no idea we were going to talk about poop today. I haven't talked about poop since episode 15 with Kyle.
It's such a great topic.
So good.
That's what happens when you turn 50.
Exactly. Okay, so recently I had on the podcast Dr. Joey Antonio from the ISSN, and one of the big things he talked about was protein, because he's a protein researcher. And at the end of the day, his recommendation was to shoot for about 1 gram per pound of body weight. And I had a gentleman hop into the DMs and he's like, how do I do that? How do you get 1 gram per pound in he called it clean food? That isn't a term that I usually use, but healthy choices. Mm-hmm. So Mo, what do you have for suggestions? If I'm 165 pounds, I'm aiming for 165 grams. How am I going to get there?
So the first thing I always recommend that you do is you think about your eating patterns and you divide that number by how many meals you have a day. So if you have 3 meals and 1 snack, then that maths it out for you. So you have a 200-pound athlete or 200-pound firefighter. They're going to ultimately, let's say they're having 4 meals, they need 50 grams per meal. And so when you look at it that way, it becomes much easier to navigate. And so then I think to start out, sometimes you have to read some labels just to see, like, okay, I'm having 2 eggs in the morning, so I'm getting my protein. Well, 2 eggs is like 14 grams of protein, so you might need to bolster that a little bit more. So maybe have some turkey bacon along with it, or maybe have a Greek yogurt along with it, and maybe throw in 3 eggs and some extra egg whites. So just trying to boost it as best you can to get close to that 50 grams, or maybe even have a glass of Fairlife chocolate milk along with it, and now you're going to get another 20 grams of protein. So I think that mindfulness comes into play with protein as well. But I think the main thing is to take that number that you're supposed to achieve and divide it by how many meals you typically eat. Now, you will see that clearly will indicate skipping meals makes it really hard to hit your numbers. And so I know with my shift and my crew, we were on this little weight loss journey together. We turned into a little competition, and I really shifted their focus. So, they all wanted macro plans, and I mathed it all out with 1 gram per pound of protein. And really the most challenging part of that for them was, how do I get that much protein in a day? Like, I'm so full. So protein has a really great satiety factor. So when you are meeting it's like your fiber. If you're meeting your fiber needs, your fiber requirements, you're going to be regular. If you're meeting your protein needs, you are not going to be hungry all day long. You're just going to basically be eating at those 3-4 hour increments so that you can get your protein in for the day. But when you combine those two together, now you get your 35 to 40 grams of fiber with your 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein. I mean, there's no room for donuts and sweets and treats because you're so full from all of that good stuff. And I think when you shift your mindset that way, it really can make a significant difference. So I think often too, I hear, if I eat really clean, or if I change things up, then I'm hungry all the time because I'm just not getting enough. Well, certainly if you live off of peanut butter and jellies, or if you live off of snacking on carbohydrate foods all day, then yeah, you're going to be hungry all day long. But as soon as you throw that fiber and that protein combination together with a healthy fat, so breakfast, let's talk about having 3 eggs, a couple egg whites, having 2 slices of Dave's Killer bread, having a half avocado spread on that bread, and then some everything bagel seasoning. And if you're still hungry, having a Greek yogurt along with it. Trust me, if you eat that meal, you're not going to be hungry for another 4 hours. Versus if you sit down at the fire station and eat what's on the counter, so you have a couple donuts, and 20 minutes later, you're having another one because you're hungry again. You've had no healthy fats, you've had no protein, and you've had no fiber. So yeah, you're going to be on a snack buffet all day long with whatever's on the counter.
I heard you say something that, well, let me back up a little bit. I went to the Meijer grocery store last night. I don't know if you guys have this one, but I went to Meijer and I was looking for a seasoning, and I happened to end up in the eggs aisle. Mm-hmm. $9.79 for 18 eggs.
Are you kidding me?
Yes. Okay, so the reason these are so expensive... No, I'm serious. The reason they're so expensive is evidently there's this chicken virus that's killing chickens. So there's an egg shortage and a chicken shortage. And so you're telling my listeners to eat 3 eggs? I don't know if anyone can afford this anymore.
Well, there must be a light at the end of the tunnel, because I myself buy pasture. I know I'm one of those. I buy pasture raised eggs because I like that really solid gold
dark yolk.
Oh man,
Yes.
It's like I feel like there's just like nutrient density through the roof in that thing. Whether there's a little bit more, but in any event, I went to Trader Joe's yesterday and I bought my pasture raised eggs for $4. So maybe there's a light. So when I do baking and such, I buy the cheaper eggs, and then when I make myself eggs to eat, I buy the golden yolks. Yeah, I have heard rumor that they're a little bit expensive right now, but
hopefully
I know. If you shift the alcohol budget to your egg budget, now we're talking.
That's going to be the quote. Shift the alcohol to the egg
chewing
budget.
tobacco, and any other of your vices.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So, you indicated that the easiest way to get your protein in was to figure out your 1 gram per pound and then divide it by how many meals, which I think is a great suggestion. What do you think? What are your personal thoughts on tracking? So maybe a MyFitnessPal or a Carbon or whatever, where you're entering your food into a tracking. What do you think about that short term versus long term versus never do it at all?
Okay, good question. But let me back up 1 second real quickly. A quick and easy protein source for firefighters on the go is protein powder. So a whey isolate protein powder with a blender bottle ball in your bag on your rig is a really helpful tool, because as long as you have access to water, you can mix up 25 to 30 grams of protein just like that. And that's going to help you when you have this 4 or 5 hour thing going on where you don't have access to food. So typically we have water if we can mix that up. At the hospital, if you're on the squad and you're running call after call after call, sometimes they even have milk you can mix it with. But in any event, that's a quick and easy fix for that 25 to 30 grams.
Just don't forget that in your bag.
Oh,
because
yeah.
Oh my God.
Don't let it bake.
The smell. Don't let it bake. Okay.
Okay, so fitness trackers. So when I had my shift on their weight loss journey challenge, we'll call it, I had them all tracking. And the reason for that was because I think people in general are really bad at estimating what they do. And so I think from an education standpoint, it was very helpful for them to start out doing that. I think once you get the hang of it, after a couple weeks, then you can ditch the food tracker because it's a pain. But I think initially it's a really good tool to help you to be more mindful at the end of the day. Like, oh man, I thought I was really eating a lot, but I'm only at 80 grams of protein and I'm supposed to be at 160 grams of protein. So I think it can be helpful for that. I also think it's helpful for you to be more mindful of portion sizes. And so if you're, weighing and measuring, that's a huge task. But initially it gives you a little perspective on if you're supposed to be eating 1 cup of a complex carb and you pile it on, you've actually got 2 cups on there, or maybe you're not eating enough. Could go the other way too. So I think it's a really good tool, but I also think that it's not something that you need to certainly become addicted to and be obsessive with tracking your food, because that can work in the opposite direction as well. So yes, helpful tool, but in the long term, I don't think it's something that's necessary for everyone. Some people really like that because it keeps them in line. Some people, their brains are wired and such that they have to have that in front of them to kind of know. And that's fine, but I don't think it's a necessary tool for everyone to use.
My listeners, if you want to make yourself very, very sad, go look at your peanut butter, turn it around, and see that the serving size is 2 tablespoons, but also observe that it's 32 grams. Now, measure your 2 tablespoons and see what you get, and then measure 32 grams if you really, really, really want to be sad. Because the typical firefighter takes a serving spoon of peanut butter to get their protein. Yeah. Although the peanut butter does have protein in it. Well, let's let the dietitian talk about the peanut butter.
Well, the thing with peanut butter and really all nuts and seeds and nut butters is that they're just so calorie dense. And so I spoke of healthy fats and that they're really important for us. And, they definitely play a role in satiety, especially. But if weight loss is your goal, like healthy fats have to be really kind of weighed and measured. And another example of that, too, is if you were to buy Jiffy peanut butter in the portioned out packets. And so I do that occasionally. My mother-in-law lives with us, so I like to have little snacks for her lunches that I pack her. And so when I packed those, I looked at it because I've never really used them. And there's more than 2 tablespoons in one of those little packets of peanut butter that you might cut an apple up and just go to town with. And that's less than what you probably eat out of the jar. But that is like 4 tablespoons of peanut butter. So the calories just add up so quickly. Another example of that is trail mix. So you have trail mix sitting out on the counter at the fire station because some, thankful and grateful citizen brought that and dropped it off. And then every time you walk by it, you grab a handful. Well, if you buy the pre-portioned packages of trail mix, you'll see that 1 handful is 260 calories. And so 4 handfuls, you're up at 1,000 calories real quickly. So those are really important for us to include the healthy fats, but you also want to be mindful of the portion if weight loss is your goal. In the opposite direction, if I have athletes that are looking to put some weight on and they just don't eat enough food, peanut butter on everything. Put it in your smoothies, put it on your toast, eat it on a spoon, mix it with your chocolate milk, whatever you have to do. It's a great way to really bump the calories up. Or avocados are the same way. Avocados are great and they're full of nutrients and fiber and all this great stuff. But if you're eating a whole avocado every day, it can add up to a lot of calories. So
I just want to say it again. If weight loss is your goal, you need to be careful of those, even the healthy
fats,
sources.
Yep.
All right. Well, I feel like this has been really, really good information. So I want to give you the opportunity, if there was something that you were hoping to talk about that I missed, or a thought that you would like to leave everyone with, this is your stage, my dear.
Well, I really feel like I'm going to come back to what I said at the beginning, is nutrition is really overcomplicated. If you're following nutrition feeds on your social media, if you're trying to navigate your way through what your friend who lost some weight is doing on your own, it can be really overwhelming. And so I think always returning to the basics can be really helpful, and just setting up some actionable steps. And just one thing at a time, because 1 good behavior leads to 2 good behaviors, leads to 3, 4, 5. Next thing you know, you've really made some significant changes. So I always like to start with something simple. So maybe it's just color. So how can you implement more color into your diet? Because that's going to help with inflammation. That's going to help with your immune system. It's going to help with recovering from activities. It's going to help with your brain. So there's just so many benefits from just that one simple thing of adding more color. So nail that down, and for 2 weeks, add more color, and then say, okay, now I'm going to focus on protein. I'm going to make sure every time I eat, I'm eating a source of protein. And so now you've got 2 things under your belt. So I think just building it in that way. And I think the other thing is movement, and this is your specialty, Annette, but I think oftentimes we think we have to get on a cycle trainer and pedal our asses off for an hour because that's what exercise is, or we have to go into the gym and we don't have a clue what we're doing with weights, but we're going to lift weights because that's what firefighters do. It's moving your body. And so when you look at your overall calorie expenditure for the day, an hour of working out is 10% of what you're actually expending for the day. Whereas sitting all day is about 80% of what your body is burning for the day. I don't think I'm right on those percentages, Annette, but I think that the idea is that you have to move your body more. So that's where I think fitness trackers can be helpful too, and step trackers. So if you're at the station for a shift and you notice that you've had 3,000 steps for the day, it's not good for the body movement piece. So your food has to reflect that. Or use it as a challenge that every day you're going to get 10 to 15,000 steps a day, even the days when you're at the station. So you're milling around all day, but you're moving. So it doesn't have to be structured exercise. So I think that piece gets really overcomplicated as well. So getting out and walking, being outside when you can be, those are all really important pieces that can go really well with adding more color and getting your protein. And that combination is going to be life-changing for you, especially if you're just starting your journey to better health.
Keep it simple, people.
Yes.
Well, Mo, this has been such a pleasure, and I will put your contact information in the show notes in case anyone wants to reach out for maybe some coaching or to have you speak at their department, as long as that's okay with you.
That sounds great.
All right. And listeners, thank you again so much. This has been AZ and Mo, and we are officially out.